Hello there, and thanks so much for joining me for another tutorial. I'm Erin Eno, and today we're going to have fun painting a really quick, simple abstract floral using the wet on wet technique. If you like this tutorial and you want to see more like it, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and also be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. Now grab your paints and let's get started. Today I'll be painting in my Artisto watercolor sketchbook. It is 140 pound. It is a cellulose paper. I have my Royal Talens Van Gogh paints in my palette. I have a paper towel, and I have 2 jars of water today because one I want to make sure that I have really clean water, and the other one I'll be cleaning my brush off with. So speaking of brushes, I'll be using my Silver Black Velvet in a size 8 round. The reason I'm using this brush is because it has a really fine point on it. So if you don't have like an 8 round that has a really fine point, then just use your 8 round, whatever you have. But then you will also need like a small brush, like a size 2 round or something. Okay, so to start, I'm just going to wet my brush just with clean water. And I'm going to just put some kind of blobs of this water on my paper, just kind of randomly, and that's going to be my first flower. Okay, so we'll just let that sit for a bit. And I've got a mixture of, I'm trying to get a really bright lime green here. So to do that, I've mixed some sap green, which I'll just make a little bit more, just so you can see. And I'm adding permanent lemon yellow to that, and that gives me a nice lime green. If you don't have permanent lemon yellow, just make sure the yellow you're using is cool, not a warm yellow like this Azo Yellow Medium. You can see the difference there, okay? And if you don't have those colors, just pick any bright color. You could even use plain yellow if you want, okay? So the reason I have 2 jars is I'm going to clean most of that paint off my brush, and I'm going to tap my brush off on my paper towel because I don't want to go in with a lot of water. I don't want it to bleed too much, okay? So I'm drying my brush off, and I'm going to go into that lime green and just get a little bit of it just on the tip of my brush. And then what you want to do, I can't see where my water is, so you may have to tip your paper up to see if you can, see where the glare is. And then I'm just going to go in and tap that lime green along along the top edge of where I've got that water. Okay, and then bring some down. And the key here is just not to put too much of this green in. Again, I'm losing that kind of glare. Okay, so I just want to run it along the top and then put some up the middle just to kind of separate some petals. And then you can go outside your water, and then that way you'll have some areas that bleed, some areas that don't bleed. Okay, but the key is just not to drench it too much, because what's going to happen is this is going to continue to bleed, and we want to leave like a nice light area towards the middle. Resist the temptation to keep going in and adding paint back in there, because it will continue to bleed, and then you'll end up losing that kind of light area that we want to keep. So now I'm going to rinse my brush off in my dirty water because I want to keep the other water clean. And I'm going to use Prussian blue for my second color. So I'll just put some of that in my palette. And I'm just using straight Prussian blue, but really highly pigmented, okay? I'm not watering this down. And again, I'm going to rinse my brush off in the dirty water and tap it off on my paper towel to get a lot of that water out of there. and just get some of that Prussian blue on the very tip of my brush. So like I say, if you don't have a brush that has a fine point, this is where you're going to switch to your smaller brush, okay? Then you're just going to go in and very sparingly put a little bit of that Prussian blue along the top edge as well. Okay, very sparingly, and then down towards the bottom and bring some up to separate those petals. And then again, go outside where you have the water so you get areas where it doesn't bleed as well. Not areas where it doesn't bleed as well, other areas where it doesn't bleed also. Okay, and again, you're going to resist that temptation to keep going back in. You can go back in towards the bottom just to heavy it up a bit. And then what I'm going to do is just paint a thin line for a stem. I'm not going to paint the whole stem yet, but I just want to carry that up to the bottom of the flower like that. Okay, so that's our first flower. Okay, and you can tap some more in. Just resist that temptation to go too heavy-handed because that will continue to bleed. Okay, and I don't want to drown these in color. I want to kind of keep them nice and bright and vivid, but also not, I don't want them to bleed so much that they start to get flat. So then I'm going to clean my brush off in my dirty water. And then dip it in my clean water and do the same thing. Do another flower over there. See, that's still got blue in it. That's okay, it's not the end of the world. This brush holds a lot of water, that's why it takes a bit to clean it out. So, but that's okay, it's got a slightly blue tinge to it. It's not gonna do too much damage. Okay, so we've got another flower over there. Again, my remote was in the way there, had to move that. Okay, then I'm going to go back into that green and we're going to do the same thing. So you're just going to hit the top of the flower, the sides, like so, some petals up the middle. And go off to the bottom where there isn't any water, just like that. Okay. Again, you're resisting that urge to oversaturate this, okay? So back to my dirty water to clean the green off, and to the clean water to get all that green out. Tap off the excess water and then go into my Prussian blue now, and we're going to repeat that same process. A little bit of blue at the top, the sides, outside of the area where you have the water, so you get just pure Prussian blue or whatever color you chose. You could do this with like a yellow and a black, orange and black, purple and pink. And again, I'm going to do that stem, just part of it, and have it come up to the bottom like that. And don't tap in too much, like I say, because that'll just bleed and get a little carried away. If when you're done, this area isn't as dark as you want, you can go back in and add more paint then. But just to start, just don't overdo it, okay? So I think I'm going to leave this at 3 flowers, so we'll do one more. So again, cleaning my brush off in the dirty water, then going in and getting clean water, and doing another flower head down in this corner, I think. Corner, it's not really a corner, but Okay, so very loose. Again, tapping my brush off to get that excess water off. Go into the green. Again, I can't see where the water is. There we go. And just tapping along the top of that flower. I think I want this one to be a little tilted to the right, or to the left rather. Okay, so you can see I'm not putting too much green paint down there. Then we're going to repeat that process, clean my brush off in the dirty water, go to the clean water, tap off the excess, and get some of that Prussian blue, and just lightly touch the tops. Then the bottom, up the middle, just like that. And although we're trying to be kind of reserved with the bleeds, if you find that you're really not getting the bleeds that you want, like I'm not on this one, I don't think I put enough water on it. I'm just going to go in and just throw a little more water in. Just to get a little more of that bleed happening. Same with these, you can go back. It's just the key is just to be sparingly at first, because I really don't want to lose that light area, because I feel that was really kind of the effect I wanted to go for here. Okay, and just the thing to remember is that what you see when you put your brush down on the paper is not how it's going to end up. It's going to continue to bleed. So that's why you just want to be a little sparing with all the pigment you're laying down. Okay, and again, I'm using a cellulose paper, so what you get on a cotton paper, if you're using a cotton paper, that's going to be different as well. So I feel like this one could just use a little bit more green, so I'm just going to go and tap in a little bit of green, maybe on this guy too, just a little bit. I don't want to go too heavy-handed, but just a titch more. And maybe bring some out the sides here. Okay, just like that. Maybe this one a little bit more. But I'm going to stop there because that's, you know, I'm going to practice what I preach there and not get carried away. So now that that's done, I'm going to go in and get some more Prussian blue. And I'm going to finish these stems now. So just make sure your stems have a little movement and curve to them. This one I think I'll bring down. Careful when you get to that flower, you don't want it bleeding in. I'm going to carry this one down here. Just like that. And then I'm going to go into my green, which is getting low. I'll mix a little bit more. And I'm just going to draw some lines up. Not necessarily leaves, but just kind of some squiggly lines. I guess they do look like kind of tall, grassy leaves. But what I want to do with these is I want to bleed these out a little bit. So I'm going to go into my dirty water, clean my brush off, go into the clean water. And I'm not completely drying my brush now. I'm just going to run it along the side of my jar. And I'm just going to hit the edge of some of these green wispy lines just to soften them up, like so. I don't want it too heavy towards the bottom. That's why I just want to soften these. I just wanted a little hint of that green in there. Then I'm going to go back to my Prussian blue. I probably should have done this before I did the green, but we're just going to put in some really kind of squiggly, crazy leaves. Not, you know, real deliberate leaf shapes, just kind of fun, really rough, squiggly leaves. And not too many. I don't want it too leaf heavy. And if some of them bleed into that green, that's okay too. It is abstract. Now I do find that it's getting a little light at the base of these flowers, so I'm going to go into my Prussian blue again. Make sure it's very heavily pigmented so it doesn't bleed too much. I'm just going to do a little bit more at the bottom of these flowers just to give it some contrast. Oops, I did not mean to do that. I don't know if I can lift that up or not, but that's way too much. Let me see if I can fix that, because I'm not happy with that. Just a little too much going on there. Let me see, and if I can't pick it all up, I'm not going to sweat it too much. Take some off the other side. Actually, I kind of like that bleeding effect. I don't like that water droplet up there though. But I don't mind that bleed. It looks kind of abstract and funky. Okay, so I'm going to continue to add a little bit more of that Prussian blue at the bottom. Like so. And now that you have all your colors established, or all your bleeds established, we can go in and just kind of coax this up a little bit, just so it has a softer edge to it. So I'm going in with a wet brush, wet to damp, not drowning. And I'm just touching where we just added that Prussian blue. Okay, just to get a little bit of movement out of that. And that will continue to bleed up as well. Now, the other thing I'm going to do, just because it's fun, is I'm going to go into the green. So my brush is fairly wet, and I'm just going to tap some splatters on this just for a little bit of something. And I'm going to do the same with the Prussian blue. I just need a little bit more in my palette because I'm going to be doing something else with the Prussian blue as well. Okay, and we'll just do some blue splatters, like so. And then one last thing is I just want to do some kind of squiggly grass kind of lines, just with the very tip of my brush. Okay, so I'm just doing them up, curving them down, and see how I'm breaking them? I don't want solid lines. I want them nice and light and kind of playful, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Nothing too strong and deliberate. So just do a few of these and then step back and look at it, because you don't want to get too carried away, because it can start to get a little heavy, and I want this to be a little light. I'm going to do one down in this side there too. You can do little dots on the end of them if you want as well, just for fun. And then I'm going to go in and also do some of these kind of grass lines down at the bottom. I just don't want to get it too heavy down there. And again, if you want to blur some of those edges, you can go in and do that. So just rinse your brush off and just bleed some of these edges just to soften things up a bit. Now I'm finding that because this is bleeding out, it's getting a little paler down at the bottom than I wanted. I'm just going to pick a little bit of it up. Because this is a cellulose paper, when you do this, you're kind of picking pigment up as well, which kind of has a neat effect. But if you're not happy with that and you find it's getting too light, you can just go in and grab some black and just tap some black in, just to make sure that base of your flower stays nice and dark. You could also add black to some of these little squiggles. Now, if you're using a color like indigo, which is quite dark, you may not need to do this. I just feel that when the Prussian blue dries, you just lose a little bit of that contrast. Okay, so I'm probably going to beef up some of those leaves a little bit. Just some of those squiggles. But I still want to be careful and make sure that they stay nice and light. But you can see it just gives a little more contrast down to the bottom and a little more pop. So now that that's done, I think I want to just add a little bit more green for some brightness to some of these areas at the tops of these flowers. But because it's basically dry now, I have more control. Okay, so it's not just going to like bleed and get away on me. So you can just add in brighter hits of that green. And then if you want, you can just touch the edge just to soften it up a little bit. Okay, but you'll see that I'm just being careful that I'm not losing this light area, because that's really one of the key things that I wanted to make sure that I kept in these flowers. I just didn't want them going flat. And we're just going to add a few more black lines at the bottom. And I think we'll even just have some of that black bleed out a little bit, just to make it a little more kind of misty at the bottom. I don't want the black to go away, but I just want to kind of soften it by just softening up some of those harsh edges. Just like that. So there you go. That's it. Just a really quick and fun, simple abstract floral. So try these in other colors. I've done them in pink and purple. As long as you pick something bright with a dark, rich, contrasting color, they look really sharp. And they look really nice, something like this framed in a nice, crisp white frame. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and that you found it helpful. And if you're on Instagram and you do give this a try, please be sure to share and tag me so I can have a look. Thanks so much for stopping by and supporting my channel as always. Take care, and I'll see you next time.